Welcome to Peter and Phil's Courageous Conversations, a podcast addressing race relations and social issues in hopes that you'll be inspired to do the same. Now, let's begin our conversation with your hosts, Dr. Peter Weinstein and Dr. Philip Nelson.
Welcome to Courageous Conversations. I'm Dr. Peter Weinstein. I'm here with my partner in crime, Dr. Philip Nelson. Welcome.
Welcome to all of our listeners. Thank you for joining us again. This is part 2 of a testimonial to the greatness of Jimmy Carter, the 4th president of the United States who passed recently. We spent a lot of time in our last conversation addressing his presidential accomplishments and the historical perspectives related to his presidential term. Now we want to focus on his post-presidential life. I would put forward and suggest that of all of the presidents, to my knowledge, and I would include Roosevelt in that, in this group, that of all the presidents, President Carter probably demonstrated to the world, not just to the U.S., the benefits of being a humanitarian and demonstrated a commitment that is rarely seen by anyone in this area. Not to say that there aren't others who have the same commitment, but because of his public notoriety, he was able to promote humanism in a way that no other president has ever emulated to date.
By the way, we didn't even mention Rosalind Carter at all in our last conversation. And if you want to talk about a classy lady, Rosalind Carter was about the best right-hand person that Jimmy Carter could have by his side, and always truly represented the first lady role professionally from that standpoint. I mean, very quietly went about being a cheerleader for President Carter and supporting him even after his leaving office and all of the different activities that he was involved with. So I want to give a shout out for Rosalind Carter as well.
Hear, hear. The First Lady is always an important partner in the stability of the president. However, our discussion last time, because we tried to keep these conversation bites limited so that we don't bore you, we focused on the presidential duties during the last conversation. However, every president will probably tell you how important their wives were in supporting their tenure. But Rosalind's role in their marriage became even more apparent during the post-presidential period, particularly in their role with Habitat for Humanity. You were as likely to hear from Rosalind as you were to hear from Jimmy whenever they spoke to the public.
Yeah, we can go to Habitat for Humanity and his efforts to help domestic support for those in need. We didn't talk a lot about the domestic aspects of things because there was so much foreign policy in his term as president. But post presidency, his involvement with the domestic side of things in Habitat for Humanity and building homes and making a difference in terms of advancing human rights and alleviating human suffering through helping through Habitat for Humanity and others. I think he is one of the presidents who has given, at least in my understanding, has given back so much of his time, his effort, and his commitment to the public post-presidency than anybody I can think of from that standpoint.
Yes, we did fail to mention during his presidency that he's the one who created the Department of Education. And which has set the standards for K through 12 and higher education throughout the nation, which is actually beginning to get some pushback because of some of the policies that have been developed. But the bottom line is that he is the originator of that and getting it established. He's also the one that he developed several major educational programs under this department and began the fight for environmental protection. He doubled the acreage for wildlife and national park system and actually got the Conservation Act passed for Alaska National Interest lands. So again, his his focus on humanity was very broad, but more commitment to Christianity was the basis for his personal involvement, not just in policies, but in actual volunteerism. He believed in volunteerism, and he exhibited it through participation, personal participation. And I believe, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I believe I remember hearing that he and Rosalind had personally participated in building 200 homes, which is a drop in the bucket on the number of homes he had impacted through his involvement with Habitat for Humanity, and through his public image being a driving factor in contributions to Habitat for Humanity, not to mention the people that he influenced who came to participate in Habitat for Humanity.
So I want to clarify something we said in the first hour, which was about the Nobel Peace Prize from Camp David went to Begin and Sadat. Jimmy Carter did win the Nobel Peace Prize for his work to promote and expand human rights through his Carter Center. So he won that subsequent, because the work that he did from a diplomatic standpoint after he left office in helping with some of the international issues, including the continued Middle East conversation, even South Africa in visiting with Mandela, and the variety of different things that he did post his presidency from a human rights standpoint, Northern Ireland, China, Venezuela, and I could go on. These are the sorts of things that continue to support his humanism and his focus on human rights. And I think, as I've said a couple of times, I think he has quietly gone about making a difference without necessarily getting the recognition for the work that he's done.
Yes, and that wasn't his goal. Again, I'm impressed at his ability to keep his eyes on the prize.
Yeah.
And the prize is peace.
Yeah.
We focus as if we've been talking as if humanitarianism was his focus, but that's just a tool. That's a technique toward in achieving peace. There's no way you can be a good negotiator. And he didn't feign from becoming involved in almost hopeless situations, as evidenced by the Camp Davis Accord. But what's very impressive with him is that when he left and went and established the Carter Center, he got involved in Bosnia and the Sudan and the Great Lakes region of Africa, Uganda. And in every conflict, I'm sure he had to start with the establishment of respect for parties who didn't respect each other, who hated each other. And this was his dynamite. This, the fact that it wasn't just a political solution. It was a human solution. So his role in South Africa in approaching Nelson Mandela at a time when nobody wanted to talk to him because of the political ramifications that might ensue. This is the new perspective, there's that word again, that he brought to the table.
Okay, I want to throw out something just to give you a smile. Billy Beer. We talked about Rosalind, but one of the biggest distractions during the Carter administration was, let's just say his brother, Billy Carter.
Well, it was a distraction for maybe a year.
Right.
I think he dealt with that distraction, or the attempted distraction, very well. He loved his family.
Right.
And he respected the individual, his brother, for what he was, for what he chose. Actually, I think the publicity, the attempt to, Billy Beer really became a personality just prior to the election, his re-election. And it was a campaign tactic to diminish his stature, and to suggest that he may be just one gene away from alcoholism or whatever, But once again, he used Christianity and strategic balance to counter that. I actually remember it as a very small topic in the campaign. I don't know how effective it was, but yeah, but I also, my culminating opinion is that Billy, Billy was better for it at the end.
Yeah, the family aspects of things were extremely important. And of course, they continued well after his presidency. And as you mentioned, he was deeply committed to Christianity and was involved with that throughout his presidency. And then, of course, after his presidency, because if I'm not incorrect, Habitat for Humanity is a Christian-based organization as well from that standpoint. So his approach to his presidency and post-presidency was always based upon his religious beliefs. And, I think when you have strong beliefs, especially those that have been foundational for you, to be able to continue to live those, demonstrate those, and use them to help make decisions, I've got to give a lot of credit for those people who have those faith-based beliefs and use them to help in every action that they take.
And I need to offer a correction. I'm doing some work on another one of the presidents, and I stated that Carter was the 44th president. He wasn't. That was Obama. Carter's the 39th president of the United States.
They don't look at all alike.
They don't have to for me to mix up the numbers.
Yeah, you did. I didn't correct you because I hadn't looked up the numbers from that standpoint. But it's just very. I can never get out of my head the pictures of Jimmy Carter in his knees with a hammer building houses in under poor areas within the South and being there with a bunch of other fellow Habitat for Humanity people trying to make a difference for the underrepresented communities that are out there. And I think, you mentioned in the earlier conversation about not knowing his politics regarding race. I think we know what his politics regarding race was after his election and subsequent, because he was very much in support of the civil rights movement and helping those who were less fortunate.
Yes, and I think the reason for that was that first of all, I think he was politically adroit in not establishing his views in there, and so he left enough doubt. But you should. I don't know if you remember or not, but he took criticisms from just about every political area he could take criticism for. That, and he was the perfect centrist of a president, but most of that criticism came from a lack of knowledge of where he truly stood. And I think in retrospect, I now recognize that his position emanated from his Christianity, and the problem, and I'm not going to say from the left, the problem from civil rights advocates was that he didn't speak the language forcefully enough. And I think he didn't speak the language forcefully enough because he was moderated by his religion, which is not a bad thing. It is which actually makes those who wanted him to speak more forcefully the people in the wrong or at odds with what he was trying to achieve. He was a whisperer, not a yeller.
Yeah, he was very soft spoken. He acted more than he spoke. He was not going to give a 90-minute State of the Union speech. He would have gotten to the point, said what the facts are, and even, again, post-presidency, his statements were very finite, to the point, and focused. And again, as we've kind of said, he never tried to call attention to himself. He tried to call attention to the issues that were out there that needed to be dealt with. And whether it was infectious disease, whether it was human rights, whether it was humanity and humanism, his goal was really to call attention to the issues and less to himself. If you want to talk about somebody who, and maybe I'm wrong, but if you want to talk about somebody who had a very small ego but a very large impact, that would be Jimmy Carter.
Well, the one thing he did do is antithetical to our president-elect is that he got involved in promoting fair elections around the world. He spent the Carter Center, through the Carter Center, he has sent 114 missions to observe elections in nations that have questionable election procedures, and has called out improprieties in many of these countries. Compare that to what's going on today, and this is all based on the fact that supposedly the U.S. had figured it out, and then we get the big lie. And now all of a sudden we even question our own elections until the person who creates the big lie actually wins. There is no way out of the abyss that the president-elect has created other than to start all over and recalculate the statistics as we go forward, because of the taint that he has created with lies. Not data, just lies. And yet, that same system is what was exported to other countries and used as a comparison for other countries to determine whether or not elections were fair or not.
Yeah, his focus through the Carter Center as well, and really his focus throughout this latter portion of his life was on human rights. And I think we maybe sometimes don't pay enough attention to human rights internationally. And we see so much going on in Africa and the Middle East with respect to the way people are treated by leadership and other governments from that standpoint. But we have our own, and I don't need to tell this to you, Phil, but we have our own human rights issues in the United States.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that we are all people, we are all humans, and we are given certain inalienable rights, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And much of what occurs, especially on the political front, is either overt or covertly against the best of human rights. So I've got to give President Carter kudos and props for his commitment and focus and direction towards human rights. And honestly, we started this podcast as a result of a violation of human rights, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. But, and I think that, once again, I think that his involvement and concern for human rights was a natural development for two reasons. One, his Christian principles that led him to equal treatment of all. And two, I think he, imagine a person who has a BS degree in nuclear physics, is from the U.S. Naval Academy, who's a submariner, a person who has at least studied war, a Christian who has studied war and participated in a national defense in a critical area, to suddenly become a negotiator for peace. He had the opportunity to see a vision of the other side, of what would happen if we don't work for peace. He had the opportunity to understand the need to work just as hard for peace as we do for war, to prepare ourselves for peace as we do for war. And I think he made the decision, I think he made the choice to work harder for peace in order to achieve it. And in the process, he recognized that peace devolves when human respect is lost. And as a result, and I'm sure he picked this up during his negotiations, he realized there can be no talk if there is no respect for human rights. There can be no negotiations and no solutions achieved without first recognizing the positions of human beings and their right to have those opinions, and then to work from there. And he was comfortable enough in his own commitment and recognition of human awareness and human presence to accommodate all types of views without losing respect for the being, him or herself. And I think that's what he was, and I think he was confident and comfortable enough to exhibit that trust and to try to train others in it and to convince them to view their enemy from a different perspective.
So our listeners, Phil, are probably wondering why we spent 2 podcasts talking about a president who hasn't been in office for over 40 years at a time when we are dealing with a tremendous amount of uncertainty and unrest in our current day and age. And I will suggest that this was a topic I brought to the table because I think it was important to recognize and honor the legacy of somebody who quietly went about their business, not necessarily seeking attention, but more about making a difference long term for everybody that he touched from a humanistic standpoint. And so I think there's a take-home message from the last 2 conversations, and that's, look carefully at your world, look carefully at our politics, and recognize that, we can make a difference if we all take a humanitarian aspect to things and respect each other and respect human rights.
Okay, I totally agree with that. I think first of all, I think he was worthy of 4 podcasts. Part 4. You mentioned at the end of our last one that we could have spent hours just talking about his presidential accomplishments. Not that anybody wanted to hear it, but clearly a man as committed to values that we think will are the basis for the salvation of humanity deserves that recognition. And I think one of the choices, one of the reasons for the devotion of 2 podcasts, which is nothing short of a drop in the bucket compared to the accolades he has received and should receive for his life. But if we do not promote historical references, then we're doomed to repeat them. By promoting his life, I hope we repeat it. I hope we get other people to understand the contributions he's made and then seek to emulate those contributions.
I have nothing to add except thank you to you, Phil, and thank you to our listeners. Thank you to Nicole for putting this baby together, and look forward to continuing our courageous conversations. And, we will hopefully continue to celebrate and honor others for their accomplishments while we continue to address the issues that face us on a day-to-day, week-to-week, and month-to-month basis. So thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Peter. And to our listeners, we wish you the best. We hope your new year is starting off as bright as you planned. And remember human dignity.
Thank you for joining us for another courageous conversation. Be sure to follow us and check back next week for more.